Okay, as Eric said, I'm Jonathan Smeeton, and I'm a production designer. This encompasses everything from lighting, scenery, structuring, dealing with clients. I've got a little bit of feedback here, there you go. Anyway, before you ask, these are the folks that had the misfortune of having me as their designer along the way. This is 44 seconds of silence for the unfortunate. We'll be looking at a few of these as anecdotal examples. I have Keith Urban, Taylor Swift, Sammy Hagar even. And yeah, it's about how you build things and how things are lit. There's nothing exceptional about lighting. It's what you do with it that's exceptional. And it's useful for everybody. Okay, this is my icebreaker, just to get me warmed up. There's a quick look at history according to me. And it all started once upon a time, 30, 40,000 years ago in caves when somebody built a bonfire and painted the walls. Light only works when you have an object to illuminate. And the more interesting the object, the more effective the lighting. In this case, paintings on cave walls. An obvious extension of that would be shadow puppetry. And that got to be quite sophisticated. About 4,000 years ago, people are actually making these filigree cutouts, and their shadows projected from candles or burning flames onto some kind of taut skin as a screen. These actually still go on today in China and India. They're mostly morality plays, telling you how to stay healthy and alive. And there's not much to them. They're puppets. They're usually on little stick armatures. Okay, this is where it got interesting. 4000 BC, the Greeks built into hillsides. There's no structure here. They just dug a big hole in the side of a hill, filled it in with granite. I've got a little laser pointer. This is the original structure here, 8,000 seats. And this would be a temple to Epidias, who's also the Greek name, but the Romans call him Bacchus, god of wine, fun, festivity, rituals including fertility, and all the things that go on, right to this modern day. About 200 BC, they built an extra 4,000 seats. And there's no structure to this, just built into the hillside. Now, the Romans took this a little further. This is in Basra in Syria. Fine example. They built this from the ground up, so there's a structure all on the outside of it. And again, down here is the performing area. This area here is actually known as the scene, and they have ordinary entrances, stage left, stage right, and through the middle of the scene. But they never really used scenery so much, and they were always performed in daylight. This is Pompeii. Very interesting, actually, all of this, but we're going to go through it real quickly. This is a model of Pompeii, and this is most really how it would look. The seating's quite steep. There's the structure where the Greeks used the hillside. Now, the emperor or the governor would enter through here to backstage. Quite elaborate, this backstage. Fountains, gardens, all around here, the changing rooms. And he'd make a procession right through, up the stairs to his grand box there. And then that's pretty much how it stayed for a long time. The Spanish Renaissance, well, the European Renaissance, Spain started building these. It's still the same thing, general admission on the floor, flat platform, and people down the sides in raised elevated areas. That's pretty straightforward. The British had the globe. This is a cutaway of the globe in London, 15-something or other, 1542, I think. And here it is. The modern day reconstruction of the globe. Again, just nothing more of a platform. This hasn't changed since the early Greeks. General admission, tiers, privileged people, choristers maybe, and the arms boxes which can hardly see the seats, see the stage at all. And it's pretty much stayed like that for let's see, about 2,500 years there. It changed with this guy. His name's Inigo Jones. And he was a British architect. He also used to provide staging and scenery for the royal family's private theatre. And in amongst all of that, he designed and created the modern stage, the proscenium arch. Perfect place for creating illusions, because that's actually what we try to do with our lighting and staging and scenics, is to get people to understand the theme of the play or the story being told. Nothing much happened there for a couple of 100 years. Nothing until this little guy came along, the limelight. This was originally invented for lighthouses. They wanted a really bright source of light, and the limelight is basically a follow spot. It's how it works is you add hydrogen and oxygen. This is pre-electricity. And then that is a jet of fire that heats up this rod of quicklime, calcium oxide. That burns at about 4,500 degrees Fahrenheit, and at that point it produces a huge amount of light. Now, ordinary metal would glow like an element in a light bulb. That's incandescent, but this is candoluminescence, which is quite rare to oxides usually, and it produces a huge amount of light. So this was the original modern light, the limelight. This little copper box used to get stupidly hot. You can see there's the gas inputs. Chimney for exhaust. This would be a little box with louver blind shutters for fading on or actually just dimming out. And this is a copper box which is extraordinarily hot, thus the long handle here, so the operator didn't burn his hands. The word limelight actually passed into the dictionary, into modern, you know, if you're in the limelight, you're in fame, you're in the spotlight, in other words. There was an effort to make acetylene, which is calcium carbide poured with water poured on it, produces this little flame. It was used in lighthouses, it was used in coal mines, disastrous results in coal mines because it caused explosions, and it burnt theatres down, so it didn't last very long. The beginning of electricity produced DC lighting, and these would be boxes, again with the calcium oxide slug of lime, quick lime, and would produce huge amounts of light, but always in wash. Out in the house, there would be the follow spots. The beginning of modern lighting with electricity started with the rotary dimmer. Series wound, a large amount of wire wound around a soft iron center, and it rotated, and contacting these studs would produce different variations in voltage from 0 to whatever. Actually, in this particular case, it was 240 volts. A very early lighting console called an interlocker. There's 4 scenes, 4 different channels, and it's repeated 3 times. So you can actually make 3 scenes out of 4 handles. And these are sort of sub-effects. But again, all they're doing is turning those big rotary dimmers. Slightly more modern, this is a variable rheostat. It's a straight line. The piece of wood is most probably the important thing. There are 4 of them in this unit, and the wood is your general blackout. You can't reach all 4 levers at once. And it gets exciting. Lighting, it became quite a big thing, actually, in the last century. This is about 1930, and it's a color organ. Literally, you play the cues on keyboards. These are all switches to integrate one, build your scenes basically, and then operate and cue them here. And there would be your X, and there would be your Y for crossfading with your foot pedals. Okay, I find this already amusing that people actually built all this stuff and took it very seriously. In fact, about this time, lighting designers got their names up on the billboard outside in the theatre and the play. Oh, in the 50s, we got to portable dimmers and very small consoles. Again, one preset, another preset, and there, by fading the 2 scenes across each other, you got a crossfade. And this is about the 60s, again, portable dimmers. This is about where I started in the business in the 60s, and these were quite common. The Pink Floyd in their early days used hundreds of these. It was a real nightmare, actually. Way too much. But the granddaddy of them all has always been the follow spot. The big holy grail of lighting is to produce a spot, to be able to focus light to a specific area. for obvious reasons. You want to be able to highlight one area and diminish lighting the others. In about 1914, Strand Electric produced this cast aluminum spotlight that was 500 watts. It's probably still find some of these in old theatres today. But nothing much raw happened in there except for the inevitable pursuit of bigger, brighter, and better. But they're all basically the same. Then we came to a Fresnel lens. Again, another invention, not for the lighting industry, but for the lighthouse business. This was how, you'll see this still in lighthouses, the big Fresnel lens. They now use more sophisticated xenon bulbs, but that was this combined with the limelight. That was the modern lighthouse. Hasn't changed much. In about the 1920s, people realized there was more to follow to the spotlight. There's the Fresnel wash, and the worst light ever, the beam light. And then they added color effects. This is a color wheel. This is actually an effects projector. I've used these. They have a whole series of fleecy clouds, sea waves, fire, and it's just simply a rotating disc. This is where I came in, psychedelic light shows. That's what you had on your hands, ink. And then the power lamp, useful. And this is the beginning of the modern day, the moving light. This is the first moving light ever. This is number one, very light. And everything changed. 1981 that came out. And then from that moment on, everybody forgot the original old hand stagecraft. But it still comes down to the granddaddy of them all, 2K Xenon Super Trooper. It's the pursuit of a precise beam. And we're still trying to find the perfect light today. Okay, and it all came from that. Nothing much has changed in the science of life. Parabolic reflector. A PAR light is a PAR, parabolic aluminized reflector. It's almost perfect. The light doesn't really bounce off. It all gets gathered nicely, goes in a straight way. Curved reflector, this is what you'll find in wash lights, back of Fresnels. It does produce hilation. This light is usually gathered and collected or stopped in the tube, the snoot. It's pretty inefficient. It's effective, but and the perfect ellipsoidal reflector. You'll find this in source 4s, anything that produces a good shutterable spot. In this area here, the focal point, this is where your shutters are. This is where you'll put your gobo. There's a condenser lens usually here, and then further on there's your focal lens. And that's pretty much it. Hasn't changed much. And seeing we're on science, this is the eye, and that's really what it's all about. The eye is possibly the most complicated part of anybody, and there are two of them. I'm not going to bore you with it all, but basically what we understand, this is something that we operate as lighting people, the iris, and it's your friend, and you really need to use it properly. If you understand photography, you'll understand the iris. The larger the iris, the shorter the depth of vision. Your focus is very small band. If you make everything too bright, what will happen is everything will be in focus. The depth of field of focus will get bigger, just like a camera. Our trick is to make it dimmer. Never go to full bright. Well, you can, but all that happens is the iris closes up and you're back to the same intensity. The perception is the same. This little area here is called the fovea. It's actually the piece that, what you see in focus is about the size of my thumb. And everything appears to be in focus, but that's the brain function. That's marrying all the information into one picture. Most of what you see is kind of diffused and out of focus. The very fine point, and relative to the rest of the gathering area, most of the 40% of the rods and cones, which is how we see, that perceives color and contrast, is in this tiny little area. 40% of what the eye is all about is right there. And as I say, it produces this one little thumbnail size piece of vision that is in focus. And the brain makes, by scanning the entire area, the brain will marry it all together and make a focused picture. That's important to what we do, actually. That's how we create illusions, by using the focal point and the diffuse point. So there's my history. I feel a little more comfortable now, so thank you for that. Okay, the brief of lighting is pretty much to illuminate the actor in such a way that their gestures and movements and expressions can be seen and appreciated by every member of the audience. You can also add effects and add drama and, cause incidents like the time of day, night, sunrise, and so on. They can be quite interesting and entertaining. So this is really the big lecture part, concept of performance. And the concept of performance breaks down into 4 components: concept, design, production, and budget. Budget. It should be this. Concept, budget. Every time you draw a line on your pen with your pencil, you're costing money. Every time you erase that line, you're saving some money. Detail is expensive. Design is also where budget's considered, because if you choose your materials correctly, you'll find you'll be saving money. If you build it correctly, not too many parts. You have to build and design to the smallest doorway. Sometimes that's an airplane, sometimes that's a small theater. You need that kind of knowledge in advance to decide how small an item you're going to have to make everything to break down. If you're just doing big theaters and there aren't any tight corners to get the equipment around, you can make your scenery 53 foot long. It's the whole length of a truck. Make it light enough and 2 people can carry it in. Those are ways you save money, is in design, and not having too much of a runaway imagination in the concept stage. I've got some anecdotes about how this works with real people and real stories. Some of them are funny. And then at the end of the day, you've got the daily or touring cost, or just the daily cost. And there's very little you can do to save that, actually. A good production manager will say it's all about the out, getting it out of the building, because it's the only time you can really save money, by doing it quickly. And getting it out of there also helps get it to the next venue. I come from the touring background, so I'll always kind of express things from the touring point of view. Okay, let's examine this. This is, to me, the most important understanding you should have. Concept. Its definition is an abstract idea or a general notion. Most people come to you with an idea, a general notion. I want a spaceship to crash on stage. Okay, that's really specific. The good designer actually will turn that back into an abstract idea, and this is the hook. I will make your spaceship appear to crash on stage. There's an example of this later. It's a real thing that happened to me. So, the understanding of a general notion and the understanding of an abstract idea and how to convert a general notion into an abstract idea sets the one designer apart from all the others. Let's have a good example would be in pantomime, lots of good reasons for pantomime. I want a giant red dog. That's your general notion. All right, that's going to take up a lot of space. It's a big item, and to have it move on stage in a convincing way, even if it is pantomime, is going to be difficult and complex. The way I would do that would be, you'd make an illusion. Instead of having a giant red dog, I'd just build a giant red leg, and it would fly in maybe 10 feet. At the same time, it would track on stage maybe 10 more feet. So it just comes plonk on stage. Sound effect, woof, woof. And all the actors on stage just look far up, and there's the leg, and they're looking at the dog that's design, real straightforward. This is where your CAD drawings, your pencil drawings, your model making skills all come to bear. You want to design it in a way that chooses the correct materials for functionality, for its lightweight, durability, all considerations, and don't ignore any material. Just because it comes from Home Depot doesn't mean it's not good. You don't have to go to Rose Brand and buy expensive stuff all the time. You can just go down the road. We'll see a whole set built out of Home Depot equipment. Production is very straightforward. It's the action of making, manufacturing components, raw materials. Choose components. Go and buy bits and pieces and bolt them together. It's a lot better than taking a roll of material, a roll of metal, and cutting it. Every single cut by linear feet has got a price. Every hole drill has got a price. Every foot of stitching has a price. So the more you do, the more it'll cost. Components is just go and buy something that works immediately. I was thinking today of the clever idea somebody used of using aluminum screen, fly screen material. They just scrunched up and then lit it. It looked really good. Again, scenery that's abstract is a lot easier to produce and deal with. It doesn't have to look real, it just has to look good, as opposed to a scenery piece of Doric columns or something, and then it has to look real. And realism is an expensive item. And the worst subject of all, and it dogs everybody, is budget. Most people consider a budget a restriction. This is how much can I spend, or more to the point, how much am I not allowed to spend? Well, there's an argument here. There's a debatable point. Somebody's going to have an accountant who's going to say, no, we don't want to spend more than, well, we don't want to spend anything. They feel that it's their job to stop you spending any kind of money. Well, they should have been in on the beginning of the concept design when the money was really being spent, but they never are. The way I deal with budget is to look at both sides of it. It's an estimate of income as well as an estimate of expenditure. If you know what the income is, and you can figure that out. In the touring business, you really can. You know how much the ticket price is, you know how many shows you're doing, you know the average of seating. You should be able to come up with one big income number, and then take 50% away and say that's their profit. And then you're going to, yes, we're going to organize trucking, we've got to organize PA. Be curious, find out what all the things really do cost. And you'll get an idea. It won't be accurate, but you'll get an idea that they are so cheap they're not giving you anything to deal with, yet they've asked for the moon. You have to sometimes argue the budget up. And knowing an idea of what they might be expecting to earn can help you. You're not, information really works. And tour cost, well, that's just a matter of how much weight you've got, how much stuff you've got. This again is where it goes back to drawing, your first drawings. They should be simple, not too complicated. The more machinery, hydraulics and motors and winches, you're just adding a huge amount of weight. It costs in fuel. That also costs in labor because it takes more people to move it around. Yeah, tour cost is a big part of the design. You'll also more than likely have a production manager who'll help you nail the tour costs. It's his responsibility, not yours. Okay, so there you have it. Concept design, production, and budget. We'll pause. Any questions there? Yeah, it's pretty straightforward. That's the business end of it. Okay, let's get down to the design stuff. This is where it gets interesting. Okay, somebody comes to you with an idea, general notion, and you're going to turn it into a tangible form that you can agree on. This is a story of a band called ELO. This is the ELO, not the touch screen. More point, this guy, Jeff Lynne, he's a very clever musician. And he came and asked me, the spaceship one actually, I want my spaceship to crash land in Central Park, and over the top come all of us, and we play for 3 hours, and then the spaceship packs up and flies away. So the storyboard is a good way of expressing those ideas, and it can be simple, really simple cartoons. And I drew this storyboard simply to be sure that he understood what I understood his idea was. This is a real musician's idea of production. It starts with a gobo, ELO, on the floor. My first opinion is, well, a third of the audience isn't going to see this because it's on the floor. 2/3 of the audience are up in seats, they'll see it, but it's pretty boring. It's going to be there for over an hour, and people are not going to look at it after the first 5 seconds. The second picture is, as the house lights go out, the Central Park appears, which is, foliage and city backdrop. Pretty straightforward. That's a rental item, actually. Then the spaceship descends, clouds of steam and flashing lights, and it crash lands. And the band come over the top in a blaze of light. Pretty good idea. And then it opens up, and they play for 3 hours. It goes away, the end. Notice how little detail went into the middle there. It's all about the music at that point. He just sees the beginning, the concept of the spaceship that becomes a musical place, and it goes away. It's actually a pretty good start, except this has to go because it's derelict. It doesn't really work at all. Yeah, I like this. This is a rental item, as I say. Write these things down. JC Backing. J for Juliet, C for Charlie, Backing, BACKING.com. They're in Los Angeles. They have one of the largest rental suppliers. They also manufacture backdrops. Really interesting stuff. The backdrop I plan to use here is about 108 foot wide, 30 feet high, a bit on the large side. It's got a huge resume. It was first made in the late 50s. And it's made on muslin, and the painting is on the front side, but the windows are not painted. So you can relight all the windows. You can light them in sections, so the different buildings have different windows that light up. It's painted in such a way on the front that it's more pastel and shadow than anything else, so you can do really good sunrise, sunset scenes, daylight, nighttime. It's got about 5 or 6 good looks to it, which is pretty good for a backdrop, which is pretty static. The foliage I just build on opera net. In a way, it would be a bit like camouflage netting you put over trucks, but not quite that. It's a little bit more delicate. Here's the illusion. This is the general notion that won't work. You could fly the stage down weighing 8 tons. You've got it on chain motors. It won't look very much, even if it's in the dark and you're doing good things with lighting. It'll still look like an 8-ton stage flying in from above. My way of doing that would be to use opera net, which is like very fine fishing net. And onto that, I'd stitch lots of LEDs and little cables and circuitries and little pipes for jets of steam, and it would come down on some winches that have a motion control. And that would be done in darkness with sound effects. This is the illusion. Here comes the spaceship. It crashes down. While this is coming down, this area here, which is actually not a stage floor but a piece of taut fabric, the fabric is removed. The actual stage itself now comes up into position on hydraulics or scissor lifts. I mean, this is a big production anyway, but by the time the spaceship gets to the big detonation where it crashes here, the actual stage has risen into position, which is the spaceship, and the illusion of the descending spaceship has whisked away, and you don't see that again. And that's done in darkness. And the next thing is they come over the top with a blaze of light, which is very straightforward to do. The city scene light has now lit up, the bushes are lit up, and they get up, and this all pops up and deploys, and they play for 3 hours. The end, forget it. The audience stand up, they turn their back on the stage, and they walk away. You just need to either conceal it or just leave it. And yeah, forget that too, because the gobo is, you see, the problem is people latch onto a little bit of technology and they think you know it all. Every manager in the music business now knows what a gobo is. They also know how much it costs. They like how much it costs, and they can feel they've told you something that you need to know that they know technology. They don't know how to spell gobo usually. It's a single B. Most people spell it with a double B. Anyway, that's the storyboard. This was good to sort of say, I understand what you understand, what you've told me. It's also a good point for the discussion. You've got to keep your creative person, if it's a musician, involved all the way through. If you ignore them, they'll go away and have more ideas. Or worse, they'll watch television and they'll come and say, did you see such and such? Well, that's what I want. But I don't really want it like that, because they know it's plagiarism. I would like you to make something like that, but totally different. All right, let's just go with totally different. So you've got to keep them actively involved and keep bringing them back to their original idea, the one that you're not going to waste any more time on. So just to concur, this is actually photographs of that JC backing. As you can see, it's lit. This is a nighttime section. This is literally cut off of an album, the album that he was promoting. And this is just tissue paper actually laid out. And this is a photo collage, something off the internet. Oh, so you see the scissor line here. This is what we're going to do. Yes, this is great. Okay, keeps them interested. Now we'll get to the drawings. Now, drawing is a learned skill. I know CAD programming is a learned skill, and everybody uses CAD programs. We'll come across this. It's actually a discussion at this point of presentation and what's the best way to present and how to be competitive, because quite often as a designer, you're not the only one being asked to present a design. They've all been given the same brief. I want my spaceship, you know. And then they'll all come back with multiple different choices. Most of your competitors are going to come up with books and reams of CAD drawings. Pretty, for the person sitting there watching 10 designers come by with minimum 10 pictures of their idea interpretation, that's 100 CAD drawings, and they all start to look very much the same. I tend to draw. I think it shows a lot about the person who they're going to trust their creative skills to.